This video is about how to make tedious chores more interesting. Now, I don't know about you, but I sometimes enjoy doing domestic stuff. I actually have to do quite a bit. Sometimes I enjoy it, and sometimes, like last night at 11 o'clock at night, where I'm tidying up and cleaning up and sorting the bins out and getting that all organized, it's the last thing I want to do, and I just do not feel like it at all. So I wanted to share a few ways that even in those situations, I find I can sometimes make them a little bit easier for myself. Now, this may not apply to you if you absolutely love all things domestic, but if you don't, maybe give them a try. So the first one, I've got them written down here, is finding a better way to do it. And the minute we actually try and find a more efficient, quicker, easier, less effortful, could we ask somebody else, way to do things, automatically we've changed our relationship to that particular activity. I mean, we're talking domestic stuff here, but it could also work in business as well. Asking ourselves that question, how can we improve it? And of course, we're not only looking to improve the efficiency of what we do, why not think about how we can actually improve the enjoyment of it, what it actually brings us? And particularly in a repetitive area like our chores, this could be a really, really helpful thing to do. So the first thing is kind of like a mindset shift to actually catch hold of ourselves in the midst of that irritation or frustration or boredom or fatigue, and then think, is it possible for me to make a different choice about how I'm doing this? The second one you may have encountered already in some form, but I want to shift it a little bit if you have. And it's bringing more awareness to what we're actually doing. And when I say awareness, I'm thinking that when I pick up the bag for the rubbish, I can actually be present with that feeling of grasping, with the feeling of how the lifting of the weight actually transfers through my arm into my body, how the rest of me moves in space as I take it out through the back door and around the side to the bins. This sensing process, particularly if we bring attention to it and make it smoother, really can have a very, very profound effect. Now, there are benefits from just being mindful, being present, but there is something to do with sensing into movement, which can make even the most basic activity really, really interesting. Feeling the water as you wash cutlery, for example, feeling the different textures of the cutlery and the plates and the glasses, actually sensing into them rather than just being up in one's mind, just rushing through it. Now, you don't actually have to do this slowly. In fact, you can do it more quickly with this presence. It's not about that kind of slowing down, which is sometimes used with mindful methods. It's really just bringing more presence to actually sensing what one is experiencing and more smoothness to the movement. The third method is actually for slightly more vigorous tasks, and you have to gauge on the day what you actually need. But if you're cleaning, for example, one of the most useful things for the body is to have a quick change in what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a change in level of activity. So going from not much activity to something really quite active. And cleaning is quite a good way to do this. And we can stretch the boundary because the movements are so varied, even though they're repetitive. If I'm cleaning a floor, I can actually stretch the movement in different directions and bring a little bit of, not quite cardio, but a little bit of that sort of energy to it. So that's a third way, and you can combine that with the second and the first. And then the final one, probably the most sort of tricky in a way to talk about. It's from somebody who I used to know, who sadly has since died. He was the most remarkable man. He was an artist, a Buddhist, and he did this extraordinary process of clearing with water. Now, for those of you who don't know what clearing is, and I'm just using that word for this, he probably wouldn't have used that word. It's when you do a process, he used to clear ground and meditate, pray on something he wanted to shift. And there's a beautiful story which I won't talk about here about how he did this. With somebody a relative who was ill. I won't go into it in detail, but he did this process of prayer. He couldn't get to help the person in person. And in the process of doing this, he felt he was making a difference to this person. He developed it into a whole method whereby he would go and actually clear stretches of stream and river, small river, obviously, because he had to get into them. And I went and did this with him, and it was a really beautiful process, to clear the debris out of a stream and then watch as the water started to run clear, and to take into that some kind of challenge that I was having, or difficulty or problem, didn't matter which area. And just gently, as I'm doing the physical work, to let that sort of be a metaphor or a holding for that problem clearing away. And in the same way that we would experience this mess and dirt as you do when you're tidying up, but then it's all clean, there would be the similar experience with the river, and the metaphor would often stretch into the mind and insights would come afterwards. So this last one is a little bit more grand in a sense. So it may not be for every day, or maybe it is for you, I don't know. But it's a lovely reframe of what we're actually doing when we're cleaning out a cupboard or doing the washing up. We can be actually helping our whole being to make a shift, whether or not we direct it towards a specific outcome or specific challenge that we're struggling with. We can still leverage that process, that metaphor of the clearing, of the tidying, of the cleaning, and actually have that impact our lives. So here we have 4 methods. I'll just go through them quickly once again. Is there a better way to do it? Can we be more efficient, find a better method, quicker, better attitude? Can we do it with mindful awareness, particularly sensing into and allowing the movement to be smooth? Can we actually bring more physicality to it, so it becomes a little bit towards doing something more like an exercise, if that's appropriate to the activity? And lastly, can we allow it to be some kind of metaphor for clearing, for making clear some aspect of our lives, even if we don't know what that is? Maybe this is just an offering in that direction. And as ever, what we're doing whenever we do any process like this, really, from my perspective, is we're aligning to something more of that creative force that really wants to flow through us and into our lives. So if cleaning, chores can become part of that, that's got to be a good thing.